Hey, welcome everyone. We have a really fun TLN event happening today, talking about social work in libraries. I'm here with Jennifer Purrenhage and Kevin King. They're going to talk from Kalamazoo Public Library just about what their program has taken place. So I'll let you both take it away.
You're muted, Kevin.
Of course I'm muted. So hey, my name's Kevin King. I'm the head of community engagement for the Kalamazoo Public Library for 9 more days. And then after that, I will be moving on to the East Lansing Public Library to be the director there. So I just want to make sure I got that out. My new email will be at the end of the presentation. So I've been here for 25 years, and we kind of started thinking about social services, integrating social services in the Kalamazoo Public Library about 4 or 5 years ago, because we had seen a rise. I'm also managing security here, and we had seen a rise in the amount of kind of hot incidents that we were dealing with in individuals who were, they would react strongly to the way we would the way staff that wasn't trained, how they would react to some of the situations, especially people that are unhoused, struggling with mental illness, or have substance use disorder. So I started to kind of investigate, seek out best practices of how to manage such situations. And the first thing we did was get was to get peer navigators. And I've talked about that a lot in the past. We were the 5th library in the country to enlist peer navigators. And these are individuals who are trained by the state.
So now there's cookies and candy.
I'm glad there's cookies and candy, but can everyone mute? So we thank you very much. So we had peer navigators. These are individuals who have lived the life of being unhoused or have struggled with mental health issues or substance use disorder. They are trained by the state. And we have these individuals who kind of come to the library, walk around, and help people connect to the resources. This proved to be so popular that and was heard about throughout the city, that the School of Western Michigan University heard about it, and they gave me a call and they said, what you're doing is cool. We think it'd be a really good some value to our social work students. Would you consider having a social work intern at the Kalamazoo Public Library? And I would say, let's see, Jennifer is our 5th social work intern that we've had. There was a time when we during the pandemic we didn't have one because we were closed most of that year. But Jennifer is the 5th one, and I'm going to turn it over to her to let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am Jennifer Purrenhage, and the social work intern here. Technically, my title is Community Outreach Intern, as I report to Kevin, and that is my team, the Community Outreach team. I am an MSW candidate. I am in my 2nd of 3 years. I'm in the part-time program because technically I'm a non-traditional student, where I graduated with my undergraduate degree back in 2004, and then, a stay-at-home mom and had some other jobs. I did work in an elementary school as a behavior intervention paraprofessional, so I have a lot of social work experience from that, and that's actually sort of what led me to social work. I thought I wanted to be a teacher until I started working with social workers. I decided that working in school social work was not for me. It's a very challenging field, and that I wanted to do more of a what we call macro practice. So my concentration is policy, planning, and administration. And because I'm part-time, this is my first internship of 2. So it's what they call the foundation placement. And it sort of means I have more broad things that I can do that can be counted towards internship hours. So next year, I will be looking for a concentration placement, and that gets a lot more specific as what sort of learning goals and objectives I have to hit in order to count them as internship hours. So I started here at the very end of August, and my internship will technically be over April 26th. That's the end of the spring semester. unless, something happens and I need to take an extension, or if I decide to stay on at the library for my second internship.
Mhm. So before we move to the next slide, I just want to, virtual hand raise. How many of you have ever felt like you had to be a social worker working in the public libraries? And I'm sure a lot of you have felt that way. I know that I have. And yeah, I see some virtual hands raising. It's just something that, we don't learn in library school. And it's something that we don't, we're not necessarily trained to do. And it's not something we think about, like, I'm going to go into public librarianship to be a social worker. And so it's kind of a hard mindset to get your mind around. And I started thinking of social work and social services and peer navigators as just tools to help provide people what they need to succeed in life, which is kind of the core of what we do as librarians, is we connect people with resources. So, the ALA for years, as soon as I started this profession, talked about the library being the third place, place between home and school. And I think as we start to embrace this idea, we need to look towards social services as an area in which we embrace more and more. We're the last democratic institution, small d, in every community. You don't have to pay to come into our libraries. You don't have to pay a membership. You could just come in as long as you abide by the rules. So to hold that up, we need to continue to think about how we provide people services that help make them more productive citizens in our community, to make better communities, to make a better society. Kumbaya. Next slide. Oh, why is my next slide not working? Oh, here we go. All right. So mutual benefits. Jennifer.
So I'll just kind of touch on some of the things that a student gets out of a field placement at a library. Although I am concentrating more on the macro part of social work, you can obviously get experience, especially at that foundation field placement, at the micro and the meso social work. As a lot of time, all of those things, although some of us really concentrate on one area, but a lot of times we are drawn into the different areas of social work practice. The opportunity to build relationships with local agencies. And so I think about that more as, they say agencies, thinking about it more in like a clinical placement, and I'll talk more about the different concentrations later. But I look at it as that I've built relationships with different organizations in Kalamazoo that help us with donations of socks, of hygiene items, menstrual hygiene items. I've worked with the peer navigator really closely, and I've gone to meetings at the peer navigator's place of employment called the Recovery Institute, just so that we're all kind of on the same page and all working together to do the best for the population here. Because these people come to the library, but we don't always have all of the things that they need. But if I have those relationship and the rapport built with these different organizations, it's so much easier to say, let me connect you with, blah, 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 blah. It's instead of just saying, well, I don't know, maybe you could go here, maybe you could go there. It's nice to have a name and a face and a contact thing. So professional connections, obviously, that's any sort of goal in a field placement. Research experience. So most students, the way that their curriculum is planned when they are in a field placement, they're also at the same time required to be enrolled in a research class at their university. So I have tied all of my projects that I have to do for my class into what I'm doing here, so that I'm doing research that's relevant to my position and relevant to the library and relevant to community outreach, but I'm also getting credit for it in class and getting guidance from my instructor. And then of course, some placements are paid. I'm very lucky and grateful that I am paid and paid pretty well at the Kalamazoo Public Library. I know that that's not always an option. But you should know that there is a real big push right now to legally get it changed so that social work interns are paid. So that's something that you might want to consider. That's coming up. I'm actually NASW, so it's the National Association of Social Workers Michigan. I'm the student ambassador for Western, and so our big project is creating dialogue with key stakeholders about this topic, because it is very important that interns are paid for their time. Especially a lot of times I'm doing actual social work as a student. So that is something to consider. I'm gonna hand it over to Kevin now.
All right. So some of the really great benefits are, one of the things that I really appreciate from Jennifer and some of our past social work interns is not only are they helping provide resources to the patrons that come into the library, but as I said before, this is kind of thing we don't get trained in library school. I know a lot of library schools now are having class. In fact, I speak at a class next month about peer navigators and social workers in public libraries at a library school. But the idea that the social work intern can help with staff as well as patrons, I think is huge. There's a lot of secondary trauma we go through as staff dealing with individuals in the library. There are incidents that sometimes go to high levels of anxiety, and to have someone to talk to, someone to lean upon, someone to give you advice. It's just a wonderful thing to have a social work intern here helping in those areas. They're also bringing a whole practice and whole set of knowledge that we don't have in terms of, the trauma-informed care approach and different ways to get people connected to resources, I think is really cool. And I keep saying, like, when I first tried to sell this idea of social work interns and peer navigators, it was easy. I mean, libraries and librarians and social work interns, and hold on. I just drank like Donald Trump, so don't make fun of me. They're pretty similar in a way in which, they're connecting people to resources. I keep saying that, but I think it's the best way to sell this idea. There's other things like, HIPAA and library privacy. They're very similar, and social workers and peer navigators really strongly believe in HIPAA, in privacy. So it works really well. You get this relationship you're building with your school of social work. If you find your social work intern from your local university or college, that is something that's really important. Then it also extends to, like Jennifer's saying, if she's reaching out and connecting with other agencies in the area to help provide services, that puts another partner on our plate and somebody we can lean into, especially since the social work intern is like from year to year. If you have a relationship you're building upon, it will continue. And I think that's really important as well. The solutions that I meet with the social work intern every other week, and the ideas that they come to the plate with are amazing, because there's things they just don't. I'm not a social worker, but I really care about this work, and I think of how it works in a library, and I talk to social workers, but there's just some things I don't know. So to have a social worker come in and say, like, we had a previous social worker come in and talk about, how do we create a way to put all these agencies in some sort of database? And it was after working in the library for a while, she understood the databases of libraries and how libraries work, and collecting information and putting them in one place with what she was doing. And we created this really amazing database that the patrons and the staff can use to help people get connected to services. And again, that social work perspective, specifically when it comes to trauma-informed lens. I'm a huge fan of the trauma-informed patron approach. That's something that we preach on many levels here at the Kalamazoo Public Library. Cost-effective, yeah. I mean, I think actually the previous social work intern was the first time we started paying our interns, which I'd worked towards that for a while, and I think it's vital. It's like, if you want to have someone do some really good work and you want them to have the experience, and they should be paid for the effort. I mean, it's really important work. So benefits, I mean, these are just a few of the benefits, but there are many more that we'll talk about in the rest of the presentation. So when you look at the core values of the American Library Association and the Code of Ethics from the National Association of Social Workers, you see they're similar in so many ways. There's another reason why social work and librarianship are so closely related. And I I'm really proud. I was actually part of their most recent core values group that did work on the new version of core values. And we talked a lot about social justice and a lot of parts of it that you feel like when I look at the National Association of Social Work Code of Ethics, we talked about all those things. And they kind of are embedded in a lot of things we talk about here on the left, like social good, social justice, service, many of those things. But I think we can all agree that, all 11 of these bulleted points are things that we believe strongly in a people serving profession. Jennifer, you have anything to add there?
Yeah, I was just, I wanted to compare the two again. So
Yeah.
Kevin said that it really does. So if you are asking your board of directors or whomever, the powers that be for a social work intern, this is definitely a good talking point to say, we have these same values and we work together, and we can build off of what librarians know and what social workers know to make the library an even more well-functioning place when it comes to community outreach. The other idea about me putting the code of ethics in here from NASW is to sort of talk a little bit about, or like get the conversation starting about when you have an intern, it is a little more complicated than just being like, oh yeah, we have an intern, go do this project. We have a learning contract and there's different things that we have to meet. And a lot of that is based off of the code of ethics. And then another organization, CWSE, which is the Council for Social Work Education. And so I'll talk about those kinds of things. The other thing I want to say, and I'm not totally sure about the ALA core values, but the NASW code of ethics is not just for the social worker to their clients or to their patrons. It is for everybody, for their colleagues and their, staff above and below them, treating them as a whole person and with dignity, and the importance of building human relationships. And that all kind of ties into the trauma-informed lens of realizing that everybody has got their own story, and coming into an interaction with another person, it's important to remember these ethics. They're definitely, guidelines for really how we all should be, but definitely as social workers and librarians, they're really important to follow.
Yeah, the service one I go back to all the time, and that I remember we talked in the committee and the core values that service kept coming up, and we wanted to make sure that was, I was part of the group that really pushed hard on that idea of service. I mean, when I hire people into my teams that I'm on, I want to make sure that they understand, we're serving the public, and that's one of our primary roles. And so I really, when Jennifer showed me this, when I saw this slide and I had seen, the code of ethics before, because other interns have showed it to me, I'm always excited how they're so closely related.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's get into a little bit about what a social work intern can do at a library placement. So we touched a little bit on resource referrals. So again, that is going to be your library might already have some things about like, oh, this is an organization that can handle the unhoused population, but they can also look at when somebody does come in with a particular concern and the library does not have a connection to a community resource, that is something that a social work intern can do that research. And again, that ties back into their class of what are things that are in the community that could address this issue, and then contacting them, finding a connection, telling them about that you would like to build a relationship between your library and that organization, so to better support your community members. Program evaluations. So this is, again, something I'm enrolled in a class right now, and it's social work program evaluations. So whether or not you have community outreach programs running, I'm assuming that you all do. A social work intern can sort of look at that and the framework and provide, feedback on how the program could be better, or data collection, or things that could be changed from the social work point of view. And a lot of times that information is collected from me and I provide it to Kevin, and Kevin goes to the board
Mhm.
to say, so for example, we have a community outreach event called Coffee and Connections. It used to be Conversations, but we changed it to Connections. And I had to sort of restart it. It hadn't been running. And after we did the first one, I had all of these ideas of how I could change it and what I could do and what I needed funding for and what I thought would work better. And I actually just made a change to the one last month because I thought I came up with a better way to distribute the hygiene items. And so all of that is something that a social work intern can do and should be able to do, especially at the master's level.
Jennifer, can I add something? Are you
Yeah,
done with?
absolutely.
So one of the things I want to point out, I know that a lot of times it depends on your board, but some boards, some administrators actually are very numbers driven, like show me the numbers of why we continue to fund this, or why we should continue to have a social work intern or peer navigators. And one of the things I really want to point out that you want to stress when you're trying to work in this direction is that, you know, it's kind of a long game in a lot of ways. That's what I call it. It's a long game. Like at least with a peer navigator, they might talk to an individual, you know, for 3-4 months to get him to open up to get resources, and then the next day the person might leave for another city. I think you've got to make sure that you temper expectations in terms of what numbers you're providing. And we kind of lean towards the anecdotal. I know with like specific programs like Coffee and Connections, we can say, you know, we served 50 people at this program. That's easy. But you want to make sure you also add some anecdotal type things, like, and one of those persons was connected to the agency that was visiting that day as well, and they were able, without using names, of course, but that's something I just want to put out there because I think it's important when you're kind of building a case to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and we also, that is something new that we started. And I don't know if they did this before my time, but about having different agencies, like we've had the Kalamazoo Literacy Council and representatives from Bronson Healthcare and people to help with applying for healthcare coverage. But I've also made sure to invite different staff members from different departments to just come, hang out, support, and then especially security. We've been sort of trying to change that that conception of security is there to say, no, you can't do this, you can't do this, to I'm also here to help. Yes, I need to, make sure that library policy is being followed, but you can also come to me and say, I need to talk to the peer navigator, or I need help with this. We don't want it to just be that negative connotation with security, which is, sort of how it goes when somebody's always saying no. And, that's again, like when talking with security, I've gone to their meetings before talking about sort of the rule of thumb in social work is for every negative interaction you have with a person, you're supposed to have 5 positive interactions. And so making sure, even if it's not just, talking to them, but even just walking by and being like, hey man, how are you? How's it going? That really helps with that interaction. So
Sorry.
yeah.
There you go.
Okay. So then health and wellness information, again, and that is connecting them with people that can help with getting healthcare coverage, or we have mental health sort of emergency centers here in Kalamazoo. And some of that is just like, what are their hours and what bus goes there and how do they get there and that sort of thing. A community outreach we've talked about a lot. I think you've got that. Request and collect donations. So this is something that, again, is like building those relationships with organizations that are already sort of hubs for donations. So we needed more socks. That my sock was running low. And so like I know Bombas does, for every pair of sock you buy, they donate a pair. So I was like, okay, how do I get into that? And so I went to Bombas website and I found out that there is already a sort of hub in Kalamazoo at an organization, Ministry with Community, that I worked with since September. So I just sent them an email and they were like, yeah, come and get it. And it was a box of 250 socks. Like, that's how easy it is. So then, I made a note in, we have a social work intern manual that was created by the previous intern with a different context that she had made. And so then I can just email them and be like, hi, I'm the new social work intern. Can you please donate menstrual health hygiene products, which I've done several times. And so that is definitely something that either an undergrad student or definitely a master's student can and should be doing for your library. Okay, so this is what social work interns cannot do. So we talked a little bit about the critical incident stress debriefing, CISDs. And so this is something that I personally have experience with because of my work history working in the elementary schools. We had to do this, but I was being supervised by a licensed MSW in school social work, which is an even, more specific certification. This is something that I think is really, really important for libraries. And depending on your intern, they could be I think that I am very capable of doing this without causing any more harm because I do have that work experience and I am a non-traditional student and I'm older. But if you were to have a 19-year-old undergraduate, field or intern, you might not want them leading a critical incident stress debriefing over something really traumatic that happened at your branch. So that's all of these things are sort of what to consider when even looking to have an intern. Legally, I can't lead staff or volunteer trainings. You have to be certified to do that. I could work with, like, let's say Kevin, to lead a social work based training to sort of get around it. But legally, I can't hold a training and then people can say, oh, I'm going to get a certificate for this. Like I have been certified in, trauma informed care. Crisis intervention. So again,
I'm going to say one thing really quick about the training, just to jump in. Sorry. I feel like one thing they can do, though, even though they can't lead it, the social work interns are a great resource to find the people to lead something, to make that connection and to bring a social worker in and facilitate that. And that's one of the things we've leaned our social work interns a lot. It's like, find us the expert in this field, help plan a training. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah. So for example, for our staff day, we had a person come in, Beth Waller, and talk about social work in libraries. And it's interesting because all of my research that I've been doing, all of the papers are written by Beth Waller and her team. So yeah, I mean, we definitely, and then, going back to, the university faculty, can all offer a variety of training, but crisis intervention, again, is going to be something that your intern, based on their life experience and all of that, may or may not feel comfortable doing. So, I mean, you can't just count on them to be like, okay, we're having a crisis, go deal with it. And then just in general, and this was just something I kind of learned during research for this, is provide therapeutic services. So that's even if you have an MSW on staff, I guess they're not supposed to provide therapeutic services to patrons or colleagues, staff members. So that's not to say that when somebody that I'm, friends with or, know a little bit at the library has something going on in their life, it's not like I can't talk to them about it, but it can't be considered providing therapy. I can give the social work perspective and things that I've learned and things that I know. And I found that is usually good enough because a lot of people don't know things, like the stages of grief, when they're going through something. And then I just wanted to point out that an intern is still a student and they're not licensed to practice as a social worker, and that interns require supervision. Ideally, really you have to, for an undergraduate, they need to be supervised by somebody who's holding a bachelor's of social work, and an MSW, they have to have an MSW. And then, so I put the asterisks in there. And so if you don't have one of these on staff, then they would require secondary supervision, which I do have to do secondary supervision with a faculty member through the university, because although Kevin holds a master's degree, it is not in social work.
Yeah, so that's really important to point out. And that was one of the things we had to work through. That was the biggest hurdle to work through with Western Michigan, is that idea of, can we do this without having a social worker on staff? Now, if you had a social worker on staff, there you go. But if you don't, you've got to kind of work that out and make sure there's a secondary supervision there. Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit, this is just kind of the, like, really the broad strokes of what is important for getting a social work intern and meeting the requirements of their education. And I did put a link in there at the end to, if you want to read more about it. And these are all put forth by CSWE, again, that council. So these are going to be the same across the country. So the opportunity to practice social work skills in all 10 areas of competency development. So those are all going to be broken down on the learning contract. And I also have a link in there for Westerns, but most schools, if not all of them, have their sample learning contracts posted on their website. So you could look at, U of M's or Michigan State's or Wayne State's and kind of see what are the things that they need to be able to do at your library. Supervision, we talked about guidance in and opportunities to develop. So really that kind of comes from like the supervision part of it when you're meeting once a week or every other week. Classroom support through in-person and virtual instruction. So that is going to be, you have a faculty liaison, which is, I have to take a field class. And so I have my first semester, I have 8 classes, and my second semester, I only have 4. And so there is a communication between the field director, the faculty liaison, my field supervisor, which is Kevin, and then if I have a secondary supervisor as well. And then the liaison connection between the university organization and the student through the internship. So the learning contract describes those 10 competencies and breaks them down into the different practice behaviors that will need to be met in the field placement. So for example, it'll tell you the competency 1, let's say it's like ethical practice, and then it'll have maybe 4 or 5 different practice behaviors that have to be met, and the student and their supervisor need to go through and figure out what actions that they're going to take in order to meet those specific things under that competency. And they can be really specific, like I'm going to attend a seminar on social work ethics. And then you can like put the date in there and check it off as done. But some of the other ones, it's sort of an ongoing thing that at the end of the field placement, you should be able to give yourself a score of 4 or a 5 that you are competent in this area. If a student is not able to say, or their supervisor is not able to say that they are competent in the area, then they don't pass the class. And there needs to be intervention with the school and the field placement and all of that.
And this is when I in the beginning, I worked with the social work intern at looking at the learning contract, going over it kind of step by step and seeing how we, like Jennifer said, what actions can she do here at the library to check off the particular competencies on the learning contract. And then like every semester, I kind of go in and we'll kind of track her progress and add notes. And it's not a ton of work, but it's really, really important if you want to make sure that you're doing the things you set out to do for having the social work intern. And
if you know sort of the projects that you want your intern to work on, then this becomes even more simple.
Yeah, it's really, I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what I did was, I think I mentioned before, the University Western reached out and said, we're looking at different places to put social work interns. We heard about the program you're doing at the library. Would you be interested in adding a social work intern? And, we had to go through some paperwork, and we had to talk about, I had to meet with a field director in school social work. I met with school social work. There was a lot of front loaded work, but after that, it's been pretty easy year to year. I have my contacts, but I think it's one of the best things to do is to have that relationship and to, make that connection. And to, over the years, I think, so then Jennifer will end, at the end of spring semester. And our rules for interns at the library are no matter what kind of intern you are, I mean, she can theoretically work, beyond her time if she wanted to. We haven't really talked about that yet. Her semester ends in the spring, and we'll start looking for, if she doesn't plan to continue her work here, we'll ask for applications for a new intern to start in the fall. I do know that the library internship is becoming a little more popular. I know I spoke to 2 interns ago. She and I spoke to a whole social work class, and a lot of people were very interested in it and had some applicants from that class as well. All right.
I do want to
Sorry.
add something real quick, Kevin,
Oh, go ahead.
is if I were to continue my sort of field placement or continue working here over the summer, I would still end my my actual field placement once I hit my 400 hours or April 26th. So then sort of the legal part of it is that if I am acting in sort of a social work intern still way, I'm no longer covered by Western
Yeah.
School of Social Work malpractice insurance. So that is something that I would need to cover on my own or work with my library or whatever. I think it's relatively inexpensive if the student goes through NASW, but that is a consideration.
Yeah, thanks for that. That's a good reminder.
Mhm.
So other considerations for the library, just some practical things that I've learned through the 5 social work interns we've had that might help you is the Bachelor of Social Work versus the Master of Social Work. 4 of the 5 interns have been MSWs. The one time I had a BSW, it was right after a very, very successful MSW. And not that the BSW was successful, but the level of knowledge was different. And you had a staff that was used to an MSW and the work they were doing. And then the BSW came on board and they're like, why aren't they doing the same thing? Why aren't they helping me in the way that the last person did? Well, it's a difference between their knowledge and where they're coming in. So I think it would be very rare going forward that I would ever consider a Bachelor of Social Work student anymore, a BSW. I think I'm always going to look for an MSW. I think that's really important. The other thing too is in a library setting, we're probably always going to lean towards a macro in the academic concentration, which is, looking at everything as a whole. How can this social work and the things they help us do affect the entire library, instead of, that's the more proactive approach to social work, as Jennifer was telling me earlier, and the clinical is like that reactive. And we're not going to do that. We're not going to set up an office and have that kind of work here, at least right now at Kalamazoo. I can see libraries thinking about that in the future, but at least right now, I don't think that's the kind of the area that we need to be into as a public library.
Yeah, if you think about clinical, it's more direct to client service, therapy and those sorts of things, where macro is, so I am macro and my concentration is called policy planning and administration, if that helps you get a better grasp of what I do versus what a clinical social work student can offer.
And I think this is important to know, this one and the next one, determine the projects for the intern. When you go into the interview process with somebody, I mean, you want to make sure that if you've got an idea of what you want to accomplish at your library, beyond just kind of that macro help that we've talked about, like maybe there's a project you want them to work on to help you serve patrons better. You want to make sure you determine that during the interview process, so you're getting the right person. Like if it's somebody who's clearly interested in just doing clinical stuff, you're like, don't hire that person if you're really leaning towards macro type services. So like, I say determine projects for the intern. That's changed. I mean, there are times that's changed. We have an idea and we talk about it. Jennifer and I, in the interviewing process, talked about some of the things I'd like to get from the social work intern. And those things have changed, not a lot, but they kind of change. So you got to be nimble enough to make sure that you have that mindset. Ample and appropriate work. I'm a firm believer in making sure people are doing meaningful work. So, we talk at meetings, in our meetings every other week about, what she's doing. Does she have enough, does she have some meaningful work? But one of the things I really appreciate about the learning contract at Western, and I assume it's the same for everyone, but they actually build in self-care time, which I really I think is really great. So they can count some self-care hours in their internship. So,
So
go ahead.
Kevin, that is something that Western has added onto the learning contract. It's not
Mhm.
required by CSWE, but I wouldn't be too surprised to hear if other universities also do that.
Yeah. I think it's important because, the secondary trauma is real, as we all know, as people who work in libraries. So you want to make sure that you're giving people the opportunity to have the self-care to kind of take care of themselves before they take care of others. You want to make sure they have a workspace. That's been a little difficult for us because, we're pushing at the seams of space. We found a place. So there's a difference between workspace and privacy. And, there are times you need to be in a space where somebody wants to talk to you in private about something. So that's important to have that space, but not put yourself in an unsafe situation. So that's something we consider. And, but they also need a space to work, to get stuff done like we all do. Supervision, like I said, regular meetings where we track efficiency. Every once in a while we look at the learning contract. Jennifer reports out on what she does. She has goals and she has actions, and I'm there to help her achieve those things and make sure she has what she needs to succeed. And then when it comes to legal considerations, I know that Jennifer talked a little bit about malpractice insurance. That's something to definitely consider if you're going to have the person be on their schooling internship. But the other thing too that we talk a lot about is mandated reporter training, and that's something that we can do probably another whole hour on. But social workers are mandated reporters, but librarians are not mandated reporters. Meaning, when social workers see a potential abuse situation or something, they're mandated to report. We are not, and that becomes sometimes. I think it's kind of great that we have a social worker that's a mandated reporter, but it's in terms of privacy and things, it's a little, you just have to make sure you talk that through. Because, we had a social worker, there was a licensed social worker, they weren't working as a social worker, but it was like, she's like, I'm a mandated reporter. And when she was working on the weekend at a branch and she saw something and she reported it because as a mandated reporter, she did not want to lose her license as a social worker. So I think it's really important to have that training. So it's like very clear between staff and your social work intern, where you lie when it comes to mandated reporting. All right. You want to talk about these resources before we dive into questions?
Sure. So these are just a couple things that I have found as great resources for me getting started with this. So this book, Whole Person Librarianship, is great. Kevin actually gave it to me like after my interview, and he was like, so do you want the job? And I was like, sure. And then he just gave me this book and I was like, okay, but it has actually been a really great resource. And I know that I've sort of referred it to some other people in this meeting. So there is a social work and library support group. It's run by somebody named Emily out of the Hoboken Public Library. And I'm not sure kind of what's going on. The meetings haven't started up for the second semester. She's actually an MSW. She's not a student anymore, working in the Hoboken Public Library. And it's really open to, it's not just social work interns or social workers in the library. We've had people from universities, from the schools of social work, their field office, coming to learn how to connect with libraries to get their students placed in libraries. So that might be a good resource if you're interested. My email's at the end of it. I can reach out to Emily and kind of see what's going on with that and see if I can share her contact information. The urban library councils have different member groups, and one of those is social work. And that has been a really great resource. So you just go to their website, you request to be a part of the group. Somebody on their end kind of verifies that you're like a legitimate person to be in the group. And then they have meetings about once a month where they talk about specific topics about social work in libraries. And they bring in very experienced and knowledgeable sort of experts on those topics. And those have been great meetings. I've learned a lot from that. And then I had mentioned Beth before. She's done a lot of research. I mean, most, if not all of the research on social work in libraries. And she recently, about a year ago, started her own consulting company about social work in libraries. And she was the one that came and spoke to us. And so her contact information is listed on the references slide at the end.
And she has a new book that just came out. I can't remember the name of it, but we're at Kalamazoo Public Library is actually is one of the libraries she talks about for doing some of this work. There's one more book I want to throw out there. It's a patron informed it's a trauma informed approach to patron services, and that is written by the Social Work Task Force of the Public Library Association. That's an ALA book. One of the things about that book that I highly recommend is the first part of it is a really good condensed kind of description and way to talk about trauma informed services in a library, and then it's almost the second half of the book is just scenarios that you can use to talk through with staff to learn how to practice and use the lens of trauma informed care. Okay, there was one question in the chat, and I can start there. It says, I'm really interested in learning more about how KPL is handling the funding for that position, whether it's grant funded or coming out of the regular budget, or ... question mark. It is actually coming out of our regular budget. It's an internship, and it's just, it's a intern position. They're again, they're just paid for as a regular staff member, as an intern. And I think we talked a little bit in the beginning how if you're building a case to make this happen, we gave you some ideas and some talking points to use, that this is, a resource that's going to help do so many things. One of the things I can show is I can show how the addition of the peer navigators and social work intern and using a trauma-informed lens has dropped our severity level of incidents dramatically. The times in which, the trauma from an incident, it's really shrunk over the last few years as we kind of fully have implemented like all three parts of kind of the way we wanted to address that. So that is definitely evidence to get yourself a social worker and put it into your budget. Because I know there's sometimes fears of using the public dollar for something that's not very librarian-y, but I think this totally is. So looks like Chelsea has a question.
Hi. So I'm the field coordinator for Eastern, and I have my MSW. So I've been working with Ypsilanti District Libraries, and Joy's on here from Ypsi. So you said that it comes out of your budget. So we've been working with pay for placement a lot. That's a big push, like Jennifer said. What is stopping you from just hiring a full-time social worker and then them having an intern? Because like most of our agencies would just rather hire a social worker than hire a student. So how did you get around that?
So I'm working towards justifying hiring a social worker full-time. I think that is the next step. And I've said this for the last 5 years, that I feel like that's the next big role in libraries of almost every size, that you have a full-time social worker. So yeah, to me, I want that. I want a full-time social worker. I think that the baby steps we're taking we started with the peer navigator, and we had the peer navigators. We were the first library to have peer navigators, and the first 5 that didn't have a social worker. Like I had peer navigators for 2 years before we had a social work intern. And so, and their relationship is really cool in a lot of ways. And if I have time, I'll talk about that. But the goal is to have a full-time social worker. So that like me as a secondary, or me as the field supervisor and a secondary supervisor, we don't have to have that anymore. So we can have one social worker, and then they're supervising. And also the other benefits, like I think when Jennifer in one of the slides is what she can't do. Like if we had a social worker, we can do a lot of those things, the training aspect, some of that other work. Like when we've had incidents in the past where there's been a really traumatic effect on staff, And we have lots of different resources, and we've even, we've hired therapists to come and talk, but to have a social worker on staff to help kind of do those critical incident reports would be really great. And that's something just there, I think would be a really benefit. I don't know if I
Yeah.
answered your question, but
You did, and a
okay.
follow-up to that.
Yeah.
So I would be providing the social work supervision in a
Mm-hmm.
library. Has there been any significant issues and supervision, like, because we are not on site there? Has there
Mhm.
been any issues with that or any concerns?
In terms of like supervising, say that again, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I mean,
so like a
yeah.
social work supervisor's not on site at the
Mhm.
library.
Yeah.
Because you would
From-
be the secondary supervisor, correct?
Right. Yeah. So I would be
Yeah.
providing the 1 hour per week of
Yeah.
social work supervision. Is there a disconnect between what's happening there? Have you seen any concerns from a supervisor standpoint working the 1 hour per week supervising you?
Well, I don't supervise just 1 hour a week. I meet,
But like the outside supervisor
Oh,
would. So like
okay,
the social work supervisor provides
Mhm.
that.
I would say no. My secondary supervision is it's very open. It's she says, tell me what you've been doing, what you've been working on. Do you have any concerns that Kevin cannot answer because he's not an MSW that
Yeah.
I can support you with? So like when I was wondering about the mandated reporter training, that was something I went to my secondary supervisor for. So her job really is to sort of cover the bases of the social work aspect of it. So she reviewed my learning contract after Kevin and I were done and suggested changes
Mhm.
to reflect the important points of the social work competencies that as a student I wasn't as familiar with, and Kevin not having a social work experience, that is sort of where that comes in. If I were to have a concern with my supervisor, with Kevin, and being like, he is not supervising me or he's asking me to do things that I'm not comfortable with, that is when I would go to my secondary supervisor and be like, I need help. And so that is what that is for.
So
I did see another question here that I'll answer real quick. So how many hours does
Yeah.
I work? So as a foundation placement, I have to work 400 hours over the fall semester and spring semester. In my concentration placement, it'll be 500 hours. So I aim for 14 to 15 hours a week, and it's more like 13 hours of actually working here, and then my 1 hour of self-care. But then I also get to count my 1 hour of secondary supervision on my time log, and attending my field class also counts. And then any trainings that I go to, I can count on my time log as well. So that's how that works out.
There's multiple questions on peer navigators, so I just want to try to sum that up again. So peer navigators, individuals who have a lived experience of being unhoused, suffer from have some mental illness disorder, or suffer from substance use disorder, and they're trained by the state of Michigan and as peer coaches, peer specialists. And those individuals, they come to the library, and they are paid again out of a third-party contract budget. It's the same kind of area that I use to pay security officers to walk around the library and to get people connected to resources. They have a station, a public station that they sit at, but most of the time they're walking around, building relationships, talking to people, saying, hey, how's it going? And that's, I just got a yearly report, and there's like over the year, I think it was like 600 contacts that these peer navigators had made with people that were building relationships. And that's really important, because then you have, if you come to the library every day to keep warm or to charge your phone, that there's somebody there you can talk to and you can trust. And I think you're less likely to exhibit behavior that would get you escorted out of the library. So I think that's another great advantage of the peer navigators. They are paid. And I think what else do we pay them? Where do we find them? So we find ours at the Recovery Institute of Southwest Michigan. And I guarantee you, if you just type in your area and peer navigators, you're going to find another organization that has peer navigators. These are individuals, like I said, that are trained to help other people get into recovery and to get the services they need to be better citizens. So hopefully I answered that. If I didn't, you can email me and I can explain more. I've done things about peer navigators in the past. What other
I will say
questions?
real quick, there's about
Yeah.
4 minutes left.
Yes.
So I wanted to make sure that you both had a chance to give maybe some final thoughts. But I wanted to thank you both for your time. This was really informative. And of course, if you have any questions that you dropped in the chat, I'm monitoring that and I'll be able to forward it over so that way we can get some more answers sent back via email.
Okay, I do see a couple questions here that I can address. One is from Angela about supervising. So you could supervise a BSW intern, but that intern would need secondary supervision through their university, which is what I do. So if you were licensed, if you kept your if you were licensed or got relicensed with your LBSW, then you could just be the primary supervisor and they wouldn't need a secondary supervisor. So I hope that answers your question. There was one about, so I primarily work out of the central branch. I have visited the other branches. I created a hygiene request form. So when they need items for their branch, I deliver it. I, make my face known. I know a lot of the people there. I make sure that they can email me with anything that they might need. If they're needing some sort of support or something, I would of course go over to the branch and do support there. And then a question talking about macro over clinical. So, and how does that square with the care packages? So I look at that as more of like community outreach. So that is that to me, it falls under policy planning administration. So that is creating a program for hygiene distribution, doing the research to finding the resources, the donations to create this, and then advertising it within the library so that people know that we do offer these things. And then of course, making it easily accessible so that they don't, we want to break down the barriers for people getting what they need, especially if they might feel uncomfortable asking for those sorts of things. So, how do we do that? We just have it out during program events so they can just take what they need without really asking. We are working on some, other ways to do that.
Can I throw, I want to throw one more thing out really quickly. One of the reasons I feel like this program has been pretty successful at the Kalamazoo Public Library is that, and if you're building something from scratch, here's my advice: the security officers and the social work intern and the peer navigator and the branches, they all are in the same department. So that makes this really easy to make sure that, we're making sure the services are getting to where they need to go. And, and I think especially when you have security officers and working with them and helping them apply a trauma-informed lens in what they do, having the social work intern and the peer navigators helping them see that, and the guards seeing them practicing that in public is super helpful. So. And I think we're at noon, but go ahead, Jennifer, close this out.
I was going to say the last sort of comment on here from Chris, and that is what I'm doing as a macro field placement and working in the community engagement department is creating programs and or evaluating programs we already have to better serve our community and strengthen the bonds between our patrons, our community members, library staff, security, the university, all of that.
Yeah. So
Thank you
yeah.
all for attending.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm going to put my current email in the chat too. So if you want to get a hold of me before the 23rd of this month, you can on my current email. But after that, this email. Oh, and there's another great, Jennifer did this great list of resources as well. And then, of course, the crack librarians here. Thank you, Heather, for putting Beth Waller's book on there. And so,
And keep in mind, like you can Google any university that, you know, your local university and go to their field office and look for their examples. I just put Westerns on here because that's what I know.
and I tell you, Jennifer's done a great job. I'm gonna give her some flowers right now. And I really appreciate the work she's done and all the previous social work interns we've had. They've all added, I tell them in the beginning, like, I want you the job that you would create here. And we're getting to the point that every one of them's done something a little bit different that's almost got us to the point that I can create a job description for a social worker at the library. So, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you both, Jennifer and Kevin, and thank you everyone. I hope you got some really good information. And we did record this as well, so we'll be able to put that on TLN's YouTube page as well.
Right.
So enjoy your
Thank you.
Are you gonna
afternoon.
have the slideshow
Yeah.
also?
The slideshow? Oh, I'm sure we can
Can I
share
get
that.
too?
Yeah, I can share the link with the library network and they can post it maybe in the YouTube description.
The slideshow costs extra though. Then you're gonna have to pay for that. It's got a paywall in front of it. I'm just kidding.
You gotta pay me though, because I wrote it,
Oh yeah, that's right. Pay Jennifer.
not Kevin.
No. All right.
right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you, guys. That was really good. Thanks.
Thanks.